At work, they gave most of the managers something called a Myers-Briggs personality test that the consultant who was administering it was very enthusiastic about. And I work at a scientific company, and he predicted that 95% of us or more would fall into a specific personality trait code type. It's a series of 4 codes that describe us. And it would be a very rare few of us that would fall outside of this predicted code. And I was one of those that fell outside of it. And everybody else was predicted accurately. How real or true are these? Is personality a 3D? Is that a construct? Is that something that's intended before birth by our inner beings, by non-physical?
The word personality is a little tricky. What exactly do you think it is?
Actually, that's the basis of my question. I'm not sure anymore. Is personality something that's going to survive? I got the impression listening to you today that the personality is something that survives after we die.
Well, it really does, but think about it in this way. In other words, you are who you are. When Esther began listening for her father, once he made his transition, she could feel him. The day that he died, she knew in advance before he made his transition. We'd been chatting about it. And as Esther got the call and realized that he had actually made his transition, then she started sort of fussing around the idea of going back for the funeral. And she said to Jerry, I'm really not wanting to go. Of course I'm going to go, because that is really the greater or the lesser path of resistance. It is the path of least resistance. But I'm really not wanting to go, she said. And then she said, and you know, now that Daddy has made his transition, I don't think that he cares about a funeral either. And then she heard her father say, wait a minute. And she said, Daddy? And he said, speak for yourself. She knew she was receiving his personality. She could feel the fun of it fully. In other words, there was no question in her mind that they were having a conversation. Now, here's what we want you to hear. When you make your transition into non-physical, you become pure positive energy. You leave behind all doubt and fear. All of your hang-ups remain in the physical environment. So if what made up your personality was pessimism and orneriness and skepticism and guilt, and someone who is still physically focused were to have a chat with you, they'd hardly recognize you. So the personality that is really you is this powerful, confident, expecting of well-being. In other words, look at the personality of little children who are not curtailed, who are confident and sure and eager. In other words, that's the personality that you all hold. But the thing that physical beings begin to call personality is more about the way you respond to your environment than it is about the connection of the source energy that is really you. So we would say these personality tests are more about how society has convinced you to go outside of yourself to make your decisions. And in a scientific community, we can well imagine that their accuracy rate of prediction would be very strong, because so many people in the scientific community are not willing to allow themselves a lot of free thought. In other words, you don't dare stray very far from what somebody else has decided. You've got to stay with the platform and just eke out a little bit of change, which makes you a sort of oddball in this, because you are a freedom seeker to the very core of your being.
Well, that raises one final point regarding that question, which is, in my mind, I'm a very quiet, stable, serene person. Around most of my friends at work, I'm the happy person, which doesn't fit into my self-concept of myself. I have people coming to me on Mondays to hear me say Happy Monday to them. I'm known as chipper and happy and excited.
Well, you see what's happening to you. The reason that you can't feel it, it's like this. People will say to Esther, what's it like to speak for Abraham? And Esther will say, in the moment of it happening, it feels like flying. It feels free. And they will say, and aren't you amazed with what Abraham has to say? And Esther will say, well, no, it's interesting. When I'm speaking for Abraham, it just sounds like normal everyday conversation, sort of like talking about what we're going to have for lunch. Where when I listen back to a recording, I'm always quite amazed and surprised, she will say, about what I hear. So what's happening to you is that as you are stepping into these vibrations of well-being more and more and more and more consistently, those who are looking at you, who are not there, find you really refreshing while you can't feel because you're moving with yourself. It's sort of like being in an airplane at 50,000 feet going 600 miles an hour across the sky and looking out of the window and you hardly know you're moving. In other words, everything is serene, it feels very comfortable, but if you were to put that same aircraft on the ground at that speed, it would be quite a raucous ride. And so all that means is you are so up to speed with who you are that you're not feeling the resistance. It will always be that way for you. You will always feel normal in your extraordinariness.
Well, thank you, but it does feel like I'm dual personality. I feel like a quiet person by mind. If you asked anybody that I know to describe me, quiet is the last word they would use.
Well, maybe what you are trying to describe, would you say that when you set goals that you expect them to come about?
Mostly, yes.
So there's not a lot of angst in your vibration. And so maybe what you are feeling is at one-ment or alignment that cannot be accurately described by people who are not in there where you are.
I can accept that.
Good, because we're always right.
Well, thank you very much.